There's a moment in every World of Warcraft expansion where players feel something change before Blizzard even acknowledges it. A subtle shift in how enemies behave, how loot drops, or how progression suddenly feels different. And the War Within is full of those quiet adjustments, some intentional, some questionable, and some Blizzard just never bothered to put in the notes. Today, we're diving into 10 changes Blizzard didn't announce, didn't highlight, and in some cases, maybe hoped most players wouldn't notice right away. From tuning decisions that affect your very first steps in Kaz Algar, to deep mechanical shifts hiding inside delves, warbands, professions, and endgame content. This is the side of the War Within that only the most observant players have pieced together. And if you want the kind of content that cuts through the marketing and actually breaks down what's really happening in gaming, make sure you subscribe to Pulse Gaming. We're here to give you the truth, not the press release. Now let's get into the changes Blizzard didn't tell you about and why they matter more than people think. Number 1. Hidden enemy scaling. You weren't supposed to notice. Most players expected the early zones of the War Within to be an easy warm-up. Instead, they walked straight into mobs that hit harder, lasted longer, and punished mistakes more aggressively than most leveling content from the past 10 years. That wasn't an accident. Blizzard quietly adjusted how enemy health and damage scale based on item level, but never clearly communicated the threshold changes. Data miners noticed new values in the back end almost immediately. The average player didn't see numbers, they felt them. What makes this more interesting is the theory behind it. Blizzard seems to be slowing down the rush to max crowd, stretching out those first hours so players spend more time in each zone. And what makes it even more mysterious is that the scaling isn't uniform. Some creatures ramp up faster than others, especially elites positioned near core quest paths. If you felt like you were getting punched in the face harder than expected, you weren't imagining it. But that was only the beginning, because difficulty wasn't the only thing Blizzard tweaked. Number 2. Loot drops were silently rebalanced. For an expansion built heavily around collection, crafting, and alt-friendliness, the War Within took a strange turn with its drop rates. Players noticed right away that certain item types were dropping more consistently, mainly blues and lower-tier gear, while rare cosmetic and mount drops felt strangely scarce. The kicker? These adjustments weren't in the patch notes. They were discovered through community testing, spreadsheets, and thousands of recorded kills. Rare mobs in Kaz Algar appear to have heavily reduced drop percentages compared to similar mobs in Dragonflight. Meanwhile, more common loot seems slightly more generous, especially for players leveling multiple characters. The community theory is simple. Blizzard wants to stretch the chase, more consistent gear early, but much rarer jackpot moments to keep players grinding longer. And if you think that sounds strategic, wait until we get to the next change, because it directly affects one of the War Within's biggest selling points. Number 3. Warbands are not as limitless as Blizzard suggested. Warbands were supposed to change everything. Your bank, your cosmetic unlocks, your progression, all unified across your characters. And in many ways, they did. But players quickly discovered that warbands have boundaries Blizzard never talked about. Certain reputation tiers still require individual character progress. Some achievements don't fully sync. A handful of unlocks mysteriously stay locked to whichever alt completed them first. And even your warbound crafting materials have obscure restrictions that don't behave consistently between characters. It's not a deal breaker, but it's definitely not the freedom for all your alts marketing Blizzard pushed. There's still friction, still repetition, and still small walls that slow down players who wanted true account-wide liberation. But the biggest surprises aren't in warbands. They're buried deep inside the heart of the War Within's new gameplay loop. Number 4. Delves don't scale the way Blizzard said they do. Delves were promoted as accessible content for both solo players and groups. But the actual scaling behind delves behaves in ways Blizzard barely mentioned. Solo delves are built around predictable patterns, Enemies spawn in manageable clusters, ability rotations are easier to anticipate, and pacing stays relatively stable. But the moment you step inside with a group, the game shifts. Enemy waves multiply. Elites appear more frequently, and encounter pacing becomes much more chaotic. It's not simply tougher with more players, it's fundamentally different. PTR testers tried to expose this early, but Blizzard never published exact scaling rules. And now, live players are finally seeing what solo versus group delves really mean. Two different styles of gameplay hidden inside one feature. But the surprises go deeper, especially when you start unlocking hero talents. Number 5. Hero talents aren't balanced the way Blizzard promised. Hero talent trees were marketed as fantasy first, not power first. Blizzard said every tree would be viable, every choice meant to feel equal. But theory crafters proved within days that several trees outperform others by 5 to 9%, a gap large enough to push entire specs into or out of viability. Some paths offer bonus passives that multiply with existing cooldowns. Others give mobility or survivability that completely change a class's rhythm. And some trees, while thematically cool, simply fall flat in real content. This isn't new for WoW, but the difference this time is how quietly Blizzard treated the imbalance. No front page posts, no deep dive explanations, no spotlight clarifications. Just minor hotfix notes buried between dozens of unrelated lines. If you felt like you had to choose one hero talent over another, the numbers back you up. And those quiet adjustments are also affecting another pillar of the expansion. Number 6. Professions took stealth nerfs. Nobody expected the crafting economy in the War Within feels slower, tighter, and more expensive because Blizzard quietly nerfed gathering nodes in early zones. Herbs and ore feel scarcer, and crafting orders have slowed to a crawl because fewer players have the materials to fill them. Some of this is normal expansion launch chaos, but some of it is very clearly deliberate. Blizzard seems to be using scarcity to increase the value of crafted gear, slow down early inflation, and tighten the gold faucet. The result? Professions feel more important, just not necessarily more rewarding. And the profession shift actually connects to one of the most controversial discoveries high-end players found inside Mythic Plus. Number 7. Mythic Plus has a hidden death timer penalty. Players assumed Mythic Plus timers worked the same as always. You die, you lose time. But something new is happening behind the scenes. After a certain number of deaths, especially consecutive ones, enemy scaling seems to spike slightly in upper-level keys. It's not stated anywhere. Blizzard hasn't explained it, but dozens of high-level groups have shown consistent evidence that post-death scaling changes happen more often and more intensely than in Dragonflight. Whether this is intentional, a bug, or a soft discouragement mechanism, no one knows yet, but the consequences are real. Your run gets harder in a way players aren't accustomed to. And that theme continues in the open world as well. Number 8. Event XP rewards change depending on when you join. This is one of the strangest discoveries of the expansion. Open world events give different XP depending on when you enter them. Join early, you receive full XP. Join late, you get scaled down rewards, even if you complete the full activity. Blizzard never mentioned this, not in developer notes, not in patch breakdowns, not in interviews. It appears the system tracks participation time and adjusts rewards based on how long you were active. It makes sense from a fairness perspective, but it also creates an odd incentive to sit around waiting for events to spawn. And if you think that's unusual, the next change is straight up eerie. Number 9. NPC AI quietly got smarter. You may have noticed that enemies in the War Within reposition more often, interrupt more consistently, or try to break line of sight. That's because Blizzard quietly upgraded enemy AI across multiple enemy families. Ranged mobs move to maintain distance. Melee enemies flank instead of charging straight in. Groups pull smarter. Boss ads behave less predictably. None of this was heavily advertised, but it completely changes the feel of combat. especially in solo play. It's one of those improvements Blizzard probably didn't want to oversell, because smarter enemies can frustrate players as much as they impress them. But nothing affects player frustration more than story gating. Number 10. Story progression is more heavily gated than advertised. Most players expect some level of gating, but the War Within takes it up a notch. Several campaign steps require reputation tiers, activity completions, or timed events before the story continues. The narrative pacing feels slower and more segmented, almost like Blizzard is intentionally stretching the arc across the expansion's entire lifespan instead of letting players burn through it in a week. Some players like the slower pace, others feel stalled. But what's undeniable is that this is the most fragmented story structure Blizzard has used in years. And with the way the game is designed now, every system, from warbands to delves to gearing, feeds into that pacing model. The War Within is one of the most ambitious expansions Blizzard has released in years, but it's also one of the most quietly altered. Hidden scaling changes, undocumented loot rebalancing, AI updates no one expected, gating that completely reshapes the pace of the story, and mechanical shifts that change how players level, fight, and progress, often without Blizzard ever saying a word. Some of these changes are smart, some are questionable, and some raise big questions about Blizzard's long-term goals for WoW's future. But one thing is certain, if you aren't paying attention, you'll miss the most important updates happening right under your feet. If you enjoyed seeing the side of the War Within Blizzard doesn't talk about, make sure you subscribe to Pulse Gaming, and tell me in the comments which unannounced change surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.